Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Friday. Yay! We made it to Friday. Friday, October 25th, 2024. Time to wrap up the week and see if we can't empty out what is in pocket to some extent. There's no chance of ever getting around to that. I keep feeling ending these weeks like I'm going to have to do some sort of a weekend special again just to get some of these stories out and on the air. We're running out of time to get them out there before the election, although I have the feeling that very few of you need any actual convincing about what to do or how to regard the election. In fact, for many of you, your part in actually participating in the election may already be over. You might have cast your ballot and are concentrating instead on getting others to cast their ballot. And to that end, I don't know, any number of panicky stories out there or last-minute reasons why actually everybody's voting for Donald Trump because economic anxiety. There's a story about that out there as well, which chiefly focuses on, I believe the story, whether through lived experience or just because I like listening to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance say it, that the price of eggs is sky high, and they used to be 10 cents for 100 eggs back in the good old days of 2019 or something like that. I guess people are convinced that that is the case and that that singular problem, egg prices, egg producers will be forced by the sheer, sheer force of will behind Donald Trump. He is going to molest teenage girls so bad and throw out so many immigrants that the egg prices will come back down. I'm not really certain what the dynamics of that are supposed to be, but most of these are not, they're not PhD economists. And so they are convinced that the economy was great. The economy somehow fantastic during the Trump years. Of course, the whole thing collapsed in the last year, and perhaps they like to write that off to COVID. But then they memory hole all the things that went wrong with COVID, too, like the guy, the genius of the economy who's going to bring egg prices down. I guess it doesn't really matter whether egg prices are high or low if you are dead because you ate animal medication rather than getting vaccinated. Not because Donald Trump was telling you not to get vaccinated, by the way. He apparently was saying it was okay to go ahead and do that. But for everybody else, I don't know, the people who were keeping the egg prices down were also telling you drink your fish tank, eat your horse's medication, and the economic geniuses are coming back. And they are convinced, these voters are interviewed in this piece. I guess I should go and fish it out. I flushed it down the toilet because of how stupid and annoying it was. I mean, it makes a point. These people do exist, and I think it was Peter Segal who was circulating it. Yeah, here it is. I guess we'll take a look at it at some point, or maybe it's something we want to discuss with today's guest, Ian Reifowitz, who waits in the wings for me to give him a morning call and check in on what he's working on. But maybe this sets the tone. Peter tweets out in the new fashion on Blue Sky that this was a very sobering article, and it reminds me that being able to think about principles, the rule of law, even the long-term future of the world is kind of a privilege. It does make that point. At the very least, cut out the eggs cost too much, so I voted for a fascist jokes. Except that's what's going on. And why would a joke like that have any resonance? And the answer is because it's true. You know why things are funny. This is a story about economic anxiety. This is a story illustrated by a guy wearing a Trump cap that probably retails for about $40. But then talking about, I don't know if it's the same guy, but people selling their blood and other bodily fluids in order to make ends meet. But, there's a $500 Glock on their hip and a $50 set of Trump paraphernalia on the body. And, economic anxiety strikes different people in different ways. But very interesting talking to people who are at peril under a Trump administration. Several voters of color who say, hey, I don't agree with the guy, but he's got a financial brain on him, which is, a misinformation problem that we can't address even with the price of eggs. All right. Well, I don't know. I found that somewhat interesting, somewhat disturbing. It is something to think about, and it is certainly true that at some level, being able to think about these things is a matter of privilege. But everybody loses their privilege under certain circumstances, like if Donald Trump gets elected again. Okay, let's take a pause at the moment, and I'll give Ian a call. He's standing by patiently at his end of the Zoom connection, and we'll catch up on what he's doing in the middle of secret book writing. I don't think it's secret at this point, but maybe the contents of the book we can get a sneak preview of. And let's set it up. Hey, Ian, how you doing? How are you today?
I'm doing well, David.
Very
how
good.
Are you?
I'm pretty good. I was reading an annoying story about economic anxiety supposedly being at the heart of Trump voter motivation. I'm sure it is for some people, but I thought we'd been over that before and gotten past that. But I wanted to just make sure everybody is aware. If we have perhaps some new listeners, Ian Reifowitz joins us as the distinguished, and I think I was saying, if you know any more distinguished professor, I'd like to know about it. Thank you very much. But he is the distinguished professor at Empire State College. And I thought that might be, if King Kong were to climb a college, would that be the one? Empire State or no?
I'm now teaching at Chrysler Building College.
Okay. That's a much more interesting place to be, I would think, in terms of giant gorillas climbing the building. But if you're not into that and you just want to, catch up on what's going on in historical studies at Empire State College, no more distinguished way of finding out than by sitting in on Ian's lecturing. But now, are you still currently on sabbatical for book writing? Is that what's going on? Okay.
I'm sabbatical this semester. And actually, I have to correct you. I am sorry. We are now Empire State University.
Oh my goodness. Well, I wouldn't want to.
Or how that works. It's above my pay grade. Even as a SUNY distinguished professor, I am well below the level of people who decide whether we should be a college or a university.
I see.
There you go.
Okay.
But I'm thankfully the folks at SUNY Empire granted me a sabbatical to work on this book that I think we talked a little bit last time. It's going well. It's called Riling Up the Base. Examining Trump's use of stereotypes through a multidisciplinary lens.
Ooh.
So some academic pieces to it, looking at, different theories around stereotypes and communicating stereotypes, but then it also has some good down and dirty, here's what Trump said on about people eating cats and dogs.
Yeah. How do you complete a book like this?
It's got some high and some low. I think to quote the Michelle Obama, about going high and going low. In this book, we do a little of both.
Yeah.
And I have a wonderful co-author, Anastasia Carrillo, and we've been working together on the book.
Huh.
We are about to start the final chapter 9 out of 9. We should be starting that at the end of the month, and so we're on target to finish on time at the end of the semester.
All right. Well, it times well, obviously, with the election would be a good natural conclusion to it, although it may leave things open to a sequel. So,
very briefly, when we first were planning the book, and it was Trump versus Biden, and even as we had started it, it was still Trump versus Biden, and it's obviously very different, not just because of Kamala taking over the nomination. Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Crazy rhetoric, I think, about immigrants would have still been there with Biden at the top of the ticket, but it has changed somewhat the nature of some of the things that Trump has said, running against Vice President Harris versus running against Dana Carvey. I mean Joe Biden.
Yeah, I'm sure it has made a great difference, and I wonder I'm just sort of thinking about what sort of anxiety it might have produced for you at the time when things were falling into chaos. But I guess there was never any point, obviously, where they said, well, there'll be just no Democratic candidate, and so never mind. It's just, and it was pretty predictable which direction the rhetoric would be going in. It wasn't going to change directions. Kamala Harris was going to carry things forward and amplify it, if anything. But I guess just sort of a weird time for all of us. And I'm just, as I'm saying it, I said earlier, I would find it difficult to conclude this book knowing that at any second Donald Trump would say something so outrageous it might have to be included in the book.
Yeah, I think the election day is a natural endpoint.
Yeah.
Because at that point, he'll go in, he'll either, well, let's see, at that point, hopefully he goes into denying that he lost.
Yes.
That's, I think, best case scenario. And he's not going to say anything with that's going to be different than he said in 2020. So, it's a natural endpoint. I mean, whatever. But, I could always throw something in. Literally every day I start seeing what he said yesterday. And if it's outrageous enough, where does it go? In which chapter we already have a draft of it. Oh, it's going in the Kamala section. Oh, it's going in, the gender section. Oh, it's going in the immigration section. Oh, it's just going in the lies section. So,
any number of pots you could drop anything into. Yeah, I would think that would be, like I said, very difficult. How do you even conclude a book like this? But certainly, the election provides that natural endpoint, and then you're writing a different kind of book if it continues much past Election Day and turns into a 2020 situation again. Well, all right. It's still riling up the base, I suppose. It's still the same base. I don't know if we had the title last time we spoke, but
I don't know. I guess I'm getting close enough to the end that I feel like anybody else can take it and run with it.
Okay. Well, all right. So it's you're coming to the end point of this chapter 9 of 9. And what is the concluding chapter? Do you have a chapter title for that?
Oh, yeah. See,
you don't have to tell me if it's, if it's secret or anything like that. Or if she hasn't agreed, if your co-author hasn't agreed yet.
Conclusion and future directions, the quote unquote best argument. We like to use some of Trump's phrases or because everything he says is this is best. Best you've ever seen.
That's true. Yeah, if it's up to him, right, there are 14 chapters on things that are the best that he's said. I'd be interested to find that out. And so the writing concludes, and what's any word on when the publication date might be?
I don't know. No, I mean, that's really up to the publisher. I mean, it's an academic press, and it's got, so that tells me at least to expect it to be slower than if we had been, if we were submitting it to a commercial press.
I see.
I mean, in theory, if this was a commercial press, this could be the first out about the 2024 election.
Yeah.
Jump on getting it out. But these folks are, it's a serious, it's a serious academic press. So I don't know, honestly, but I'm hoping that it comes out, as soon as possible. I wish I could guarantee you that. I would hope it would come out sometime in 2025. I mean, we have to we're submitting our draft. Then they're going to get back to us with some feedback, hopefully not too much. And so there's a little bit of back and forth. And then I don't know exactly how the peer review process will work. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to look into the mechanics of it. It's not entirely clear. And even some of us who might think we have a guess about how the commercial press might handle something like this probably have very little clue unless there are other academic publishers out there, and there may be in the audience. But for most of us, it's a big mystery how anything gets published, much less by academic press. But I could certainly see them taking their time about it and being more careful and not motivated by the rush to get to the market and make the sales necessarily. But I guess that's got to be in there somewhere.
Yeah, somebody's got to write the paychecks, I guess, for even nonprofit employees.
Right. True enough. All right. Well, let's see what other things might be going on that are occupying your time, or is this all consuming? I mean, you must be obviously watching day to day. And how are you feeling about the election? Are you experiencing any of the anxiety that most others are? realizing that we're at a coin toss on fascism.
Well, as a Democrat, we are congenitally anxious.
Yes.
I mean, I do think it's basically a coin flip. I still, I'd rather be Harris than Trump. If you want to say that.
Well, sure.
Well, I mean, forgetting about the moral implication. Yeah, I mean, I do think she's got a slightly better chance than he does. I do follow the polling obsessively.
Okay.
I'm updating that 538 way too many times. I've now the Washington Post's poll averages are interesting, and I don't know how much you've gone over this with the listeners throughout the weeks, but they're the only polling average that I know of that makes an explicit effort to include only high quality polls, because this is the big thing, and I think we've been talking about this in 2022 on your show, is that the red wave was, the media bought into the red wave because it was paid for Republican polls that moved the averages specifically so that they would shift the media narrative. And you say, why would you do that? Well, it probably won the Republicans Wisconsin because the Democratic, I think, senatorial committee or whatever, stopped funding Mandela Barnes because they thought he was down 7 because of Republican polls. He ended up losing by 1. So we know they're doing that this time. So the Post is, in excluding those polls, I think is makes it a good source. And they're showing really not very much movement toward Trump at all in the last week. I look at that I looked at it this morning, and they basically, they've got the big 7 states. One of them hadn't moved in the last week. 3 of them had moved toward Trump, and 3 of them had moved toward Harris. So you're not getting much out of that. On Twitter, I look at Tom Bonnier, who runs Target Smart, which is a Democratic firm, but he's very data driven. He's been looking a lot at early votes, and he's seeing some positive signs from early votes. And there was some polling that came out this morning about some bellwether counties in Pennsylvania, which is interesting because usually you don't get county by county level polling, but they're polling the 7th congressional district, which is a bellwether district that apparently just got shifted from in one of the assessors. I don't remember if it was roll call. It got shifted from toss up to leans Democrat, which is really important.
Oh.
And then they did a poll of that congressional district, and there are 3 counties. In one of the counties, Harris, according to the poll, is running even with Biden in 2020, and in the other 2 counties, she's running ahead of Biden 2020. So again, it's a small data point, but if she runs better than him in PA 7,
going
to win Pennsylvania. And if she wins Pennsylvania, she's probably going to win the election. But there's other data points that are all over the place. So I'll stand by my assessment. It's a coin toss, but her side of the coin, I think, is a little bit more likely to land up.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, then, of course. Then statistically speaking, then it's not a coin toss. But that's okay. I like the weighted coin. That's fine. It's not the toss we're worried about. It's the coin.
Yes.
We know. All right, and how it comes up, well, that is interesting. In Pennsylvania, 7 is, I was just quickly looking it up, that's like Lehigh Valley. Is what it looks like.
Lehigh Valley, because that was one of the names of the counties, Lehigh, and I don't remember off the top of my head the other 2, but and one of the counties had been pro-Trump, and one of them, Matt, we're looking at comparison. If it was if Trump won the county by 20 last time, and he's only leading it by 15 this time, that means Harris is doing better.
Yes, right.
Wasn't the audience were math challenged, right? That's sort of...
or just our hardcore Jill Stein voters, and there's just not that many in the audience. That's where they're going, the extra 5%, no. But, so it's Lehigh, true, Monroe, and Northampton counties, apparently. Northampton is like Easton... right on the border of New Jersey. That's where Lafayette College is. And Lehigh University, obviously, as well. Nearby Bethlehem, Allentown, this is the area that we're speaking of. Yeah. So, all right.
I always think of Billy Joel, of course.
Yes.
Because you and I are men of a certain age, as we've discussed.
Yes, right, true. And I always think of that, too. And then I think of how unfortunate it is that I've just thought of that song, which is not one of my favorites.
Oh, I do like that song, although I'm not a big Billy Joel fan. And I recently learned that he first wrote it, it was about Bethlehem. Because it has a number of syllables. And then I don't know, I can't remember why, but he got convinced to change it to Allentown before he sang it into the recording box.
I could see that. Yeah, I imagine perhaps confusion and people not really knowing which Bethlehem do you mean? You know, sure. I guess that's a possibility. It was a song about economic anxiety to some extent.
It surely was.
Before it was cool to be economically anxious. All right.
See these people, the economy was much better under Trump. Okay. Yeah, until COVID.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, but also. It wasn't, but also there was COVID.
Right. Look, you and I know about this. It's important to do the narrative. And I will acknowledge that Biden did not do the best job of shaping the narrative. The narrative should have been this, and it's very simple. One, Donald Trump came into office and inherited the Barack Obama, Joe Biden economy. It was a terrific economy. And all that happened was it was his good luck to be in the middle of that economy, which was rolling strong. He passed a tax cut for the wealthy, which was totally unnecessary in terms of stimulating in the economy when it was already running strong. He drove it into a deficit. Then COVID hit. And from day one, Biden should have been saying, okay, I'm coming into the COVID economy. I'm going to do whatever I can to avoid the next Great Depression. Because we're going to be doing those things, we're going to run inflation hot. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. So we should be preparing voters for it. And then every month he should have been saying, okay, yep, here comes inflation. It's high. But remember, it's high all over the world. It's not what we're doing. Everybody's got. And so by laying the groundwork for that, you're putting in people's minds, oh, okay, it's not that Trump did better than Biden. I don't know. Maybe it's hard for people to step back and look at things, but big picture wise, but you want to be shaping the narrative at all times. And as a historian, you have to sort of get out from the day to day and shape people's opinions almost before things happen when you have something like this. And we all knew it was happening. There was, all the economic writers, Paul Krugman, were, all right, inflation's going to come because it's got to come when you have a bounce back off of something that's such a huge downturn, which is what we had, in 2020, that huge downturn caused by the shutdown of the economy. It's a pendulum. It's going to swing back anyway. So enough of me looking backwards, but that is one area where I think you've got some legitimate criticism of the Democrats' messaging. And I remember us talking about Obama not being the best big picture messenger before the 2012 election too, as well. And so maybe it's just not something that we're great at. What are you going to do?
Well, it's an interesting. Yeah, I guess it's a hole in the bag of tricks. I guess if this were to keep happening, and we can't adequately prepare people for tougher times on the way, hopefully, to better times. And I guess that's just too easily exploited by the right, and I guess that too historically that's always been the ticket that fascists punch on their way to power, is the claim that the other guys ruined the economy, and it's so bad that it justifies almost any means to make things better for you, the real people. And that sounds familiar as we approach this election. But yeah, I don't recall that there was anything particularly sparkling or fantastic about the Trump economy, to the extent there even was one. And as unfair as it may have been that the onset of the COVID pandemic fell during his term in office, that's the job. And when something catastrophic happens, if you don't have any legs under you, it will get 10 times worse. And that is what happened. And it's amazing to blot that out and to say, well, eggs were cheap in 2019. Then there were no eggs at all available, and no toilet paper, and no meat. But gosh, that economy, I can't wait to get back to it. It's just so tough now having all of these consumer choices, but they're expensive.
Right. And somehow Trump gets a pass for the COVID economy.
Yeah.
But the inflation, which is also the COVID economy, Biden somehow doesn't get a pass for that. And also the fact that, prices are up but wages are up more. Real wage growth has real wages, wages adjusted for inflation, are higher now than they were in 2019 before the pandemic. But people don't feel it, and whatever.
If you're not getting them, then you're not going to feel it. That's a very individual thing, and of course, telling people that across the economy, on average, people are doing better. You're not, but take comfort in the average. That I can see why that wouldn't penetrate as a message either. But I am a little bit puzzled about what they think the cause and effect are. But they're not economists; they're just regular people trying to make their way through the day. But the news flash here is prices don't just come down, not because the president says so. Certainly not because Donald Trump says so. A 200% tariff on everything you buy at Walmart, largely unhelpful for you, let's say. But, I don't know. That message doesn't appear to be sinking in. But
well, you have this data also that shows, I think Paul Krugman has done a good job of highlighting this. How is the economy? And let's say 2/3 of people say it's bad. How is your personal economic situation? 75% of them say it's good, right? Because it isn't bad, but you keep reading stories in the media, and the right wing feeds it, and whatever that shapes that opinion.
It's important to it is a personal experience that's true, and then sometimes though the personal experience is exactly as you say. I feel like the economy is bad, but actually I'm doing okay. And I guess in this instance we have a opinion columnist traveling the country looking for that 25% of the people who say personally it's worse for me, and I'd like to tell you why. And I have a Trump hat, and I guess that's what gets him into the article. All right, let's take a quick break and be right back.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a brief discussion in the break. We had a quick huddle here, 2-minute TV timeout. And would like to, we can get back to the subject of the polling that you've been obsessing over, and I think you, along with everybody else. Greg has been warning us that at this point, all you're really going to be able to come away with is that it looks like the election should be close, and that the margins as between the two candidates has pretty much remained the same ever since. There are a few outlier polls that will flip things back and forth every once in a while, but again, the benefit of having the aggregates and averages will illustrate the point for you. Individual contests in individual states, and then, of course, the fight for seats in Congress, and of course, statewide elections that might also help determine how we sort out the outcome, whether it's people being elected to the Supreme Court bench in some states or secretaries of state, et cetera, et cetera. But as we turned back to the polling, you mentioned specifically as we were chatting offline about the latest Marist polling, and shared with me a link to Tom Bonnier speaking to that subject. What are you pointing out here?
Right. So Marist has polled early voters. People have already voted. In Arizona, North Dakota, what am I saying? North Carolina.
Okay.
And Georgia. Right. So in Arizona, Harris is leading by 11 in these poll of early voters.
Wow.
North Carolina, she's leading by 12, and Georgia, she's leading by 9. Now that in itself means nothing.
I mean, it's good, but yeah.
We don't even know if it's good because, Democrats typically vote early more than Republicans. So it's a question of how good, right? The reason why this is a positive from understanding what's going on in the explanation is that Harris leading by 11, 12, and 9 in those states is good because they also asked those voters that they polled, those early voters that they polled, what party do you register? Are you registered with, or do you identify with, or whatever? And the numbers are less Democratic than the actual vote. And I'm not seeing an actual number there, but let's say that those 3 states, you've got an average of about plus 10 for Harris. It looks, the party ID of those early voters polled maybe it's plus 5 or 6 or 7 Harris, right? It's lower, less Democratic than the actual vote, which suggests that even if you assume all the Dem identifiers are voting Democratic and all the Republican identifiers are voting Republican, it suggests that the early vote independents are more Democratic than Republican, right? To give you, otherwise, right? If the early voters were 5% more Democratic than Republican, and the early vote was 5% more Democratic than Republican, then it would the indies are breaking 50-50. But because it's not the case, because it looks like the Indy vote is more Democratic than Republican. That's what Bonnier and also what the person who that's what the analysis tells us. Yeah, I see. And we don't know. It's one it's one small thing, but Bonnier is basically saying, look, this could be a very good sign for Harris, but it's polling. So, we don't know.
Yeah. All right. I mean, but it is an interesting thing. Actually, as you were describing it, it occurred to me that it seems like a much, much more easily supportable and less shady version, but still psychologically maybe some of the same effect as the weird partisan polls with which Republicans were last time around and still now, flooding the zone in the last couple days and looking to depress either Democratic turnout or enthusiasm. And here we have these people have already voted. That should be a fairly good result in terms of the reliability of it. There's always the question of whether people are telling the truth to pollsters, but there doesn't appear to be any real reason to mislead them here. And heading into Election Day, to have numbers like this to say, well, the people who are voting early, Harris is up double digits in some of these states, and I know that's not the end result. There's millions more people to cast their ballots. There's lots of reason to believe that Democrats are voting earlier in greater numbers, all true. But the top line, if you're, barely paying attention but thinking about voting Republican, and you pick up the newspaper and find out, holy cow, my swing state is going +9 for Harris, some people will take that as motivation to vote. Others will take it as motivation to say, I never really liked that guy, and forget it. This state's cooked. I'm not going to go. I wonder. It's probably not a great practice.
Oh, sorry.
I was just thinking that it's probably in effect. I wonder if people will complain about it being like doing exit polling. The voting, the polls aren't closed. Don't release the exit polling. You're going to depress turnout. But these are these are people who already cast their ballots. True, but it seems to have the same. I wonder if it has the same effect. We'll have to be studying that. Something new book coming up.
So the number that I found was that the Arizona vote is by party ID is +6.4 Republican. So that was the number I had been looking for. I don't see it for the other states, but so if the party ID is 6.4 plus 6.4 Republican, but Harris is leading by 11.
Yeah,
that's what you want to see for the early vote. Like it doesn't mean anything on its own that she's leading in the early vote. Like right? I mean, if because the early vote is Democratic, it's a matter of is she leading by more than she needs to be, right? If we know that the election day vote is going to be +10 Republican, then you better be +11 heading into election.
Right.
Being up by 8 would be bad. So being up is not good necessarily, but this is good because they're up by more than the party registration of the early voter voters. Let's hope. I mean, if you're looking for good news, it's good news. And if you've got North Carolina, Arizona, and Georgia on your side, it's slam dunk.
Yeah, it's also, I guess it's helpful. I don't know how much this will sink in the few days we have left before Election Day, but I mean, if you were really blaring these answers, and it's unlike, it's very undemocratic, operative-like to really be blaring these numbers, because usually they just want to be much more cautious. But I'm also thinking of how much time and effort Republicans are investing in blaring narratives that they may know aren't true or won't hold up, but they're blaring these narratives in preparation for claiming that the whole thing's a fraud and was rigged from the beginning because we heard we were winning and now we've lost. This is the same play as 2020 in essence. But yeah, it would be interesting to hold that up again. I mean, I suppose if you're going to be out in the streets protesting that the whole thing was rigged and it was stolen again from Trump, you're not really likely to listen to, 10 days ago, the Marist poll indicated that in certain of these states, the early voters were very heavily in favor of Harris. Well, yeah, I guess at that point you say, well, that's fake news. Plus also everyone knows we won by 1,000% in every single state. And I'm going to riot now. So I don't know whether there's any convincing them, but it is interesting to know that this is out there, and I mean, Democrats just love to approach this stuff with caution, but it does speak to a reason for enthusiasm, certainly. And the Arizona number in particular, if I understood you correctly, saying it was plus 6.5 Republican registration that was coming out, and yet she held a 9 point, or was this 9 or 11 point lead in Arizona?
Yeah, that's what I saw.
I mean, that suggests not only either independents breaking 100% for Harris, or and I imagine at some point we're going to find out, and Republican rioters, MAGA rioters, will be likely to deny that this is the case. But at some point we're going to find out what percentage of registered Republicans just said, no, I'm voting for Harris. They interview them every day. They're in the newspaper all the time. They're cutting ads saying that they're doing it. There's prominent Republicans publicly endorsing her. But yeah, definitely I would anticipate Republican MAGA rioter types pointing at this and saying there's a 6-point Republican advantage in registration in the state. There's no way. It has to be rigged for us to have lost this state at all, much less lost it by 3 points.
Right, and it's 6 plus 6.4 registration for the early voters.
Yes,
not for all. Although I think there's that's a different number,
and they'll happily confuse them if necessary.
I didn't even process it right until you just said it. I was thinking, it's plus 6.4, but she's up by 11. That's 4.5 points. It's not. It's 17.5 points.
Yeah.
It's 6.4 Republican to plus 11. Right. And they can say all those things, but first of all, we know that there's still 1/3 are independent. So that's why I was, that's clearly where some of this is coming from. But some of it also probably has to be some Republicans crossing over, which there are. We have, all of those Liz Cheney types. Mm-hmm. And it's funny. I do think the other reason why they do this, in addition to setting themselves up to be able to say it was rigged, is just because Donald Trump needs to think he's winning, and they're like feeding his ego. Because he gets too upset, and they think maybe he'll be even more stable if he thinks he's losing.
I don't know how that's possible.
The other data point, though, since we're on data,
the
New York Times Siena poll came out, and it did shift from 49-46 Harris to 48-48, which is not a huge shift within, certainly within the margin of error. The one thing that's interesting I found here is in that poll, they say about 15% of voters describe themselves as not having fully decided their vote. Now, I guess that ranges from completely undecided to leaning or whatever, but not fully decided. 2 weeks ago, that group, Trump led by 1 point, 36-35. But now Harris leads among that group by 10 points, 42-32. So it suggests that if at least in this voter universe of these Times pollsters, that Harris is going to pick up more of those undecided voters than Trump, which, if that's a trend nationally, then that's really important, because all of these polls, even the ones that are head to head, they generally have 3-4% undecided. If she's going to pick up a majority of that 3 to 4% or more or whatever, I mean, this group says 15% is not fully decided, then that tells you she's got more room to grow than he does, and that, he may have hit his ceiling. Again, take that with a grain of salt. But I know Democrats are always tearing their hair out. So these are real reasons to be at least somewhat optimistic. And I'd rather have people be only 80% tearing their hair out rather than 100 to help with that.
Right. You could comb it over. Yeah, as long as you retain 20%. There's something you can do. This is interesting, though. Yeah, I guess psychologically, if you're trying to sort of profile the people who are in this still undecided category, and that seems like a dangerous game, because I don't know that I understand them at all. But if you are there, I guess I'm in trying to decide whether it's more likely that they would break late for Harris. It does seem like that's the case, and I guess historically the late breakers have been towards when there's a very clear incumbent versus challenger. There's a certain pattern to it when it's an open seat and both people, neither is incumbent to the job. And this is a new situation, of course, somebody who's been president trying to regain the seat. So I'm not sure exactly how to look at it, but I'm thinking if you are undecided, there's clearly at this point, I imagine anybody entertaining even the possibility of voting for Trump has got to have by now a pretty clear picture of what Trump is about. There's no, I'm not sure what his position is on X, Y, Z. Well, you really aren't, because you can never tell what his positions are. But you got to have a pretty clear picture of the guy. He's been president. Kamala Harris, of course, has been vice president, but that doesn't really give us a clear view of how she'd run things as president. I imagine that if you're still pondering things, the chances have to be on the side of your breaking to Kamala Harris, if you haven't already declared for Trump, who's a pretty well-known quantity. But yeah, on the individual level, this will vary. And in some cases, it's I know what he is. He's terrible. But for instance, like the people in today's article in the Times, I'm voting based on my perception of what the price of eggs once was. And I can't believe I'm having to bring myself to possibly vote for him. But I think that's probably a minority view at this point.
Probably.
I would guess. I mean, it's total speculation, but what else are we here for if not to speculate wildly about the future of the country?
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, we have the time to do it. All right. Yeah, this is interesting, and it also puts us, I mean, this is, what are we in our third presidential election with substantial early vote opportunities, and now it's become much more widespread. This is a new niche in polling, right? I find this very interesting to be looking at, polling early voters and to have that information in hand. And what does it mean in terms of depressing or exciting election day turnout? I don't know if we've, I think there's a parallel here to exit poll, early release of exit polls. And I wonder whether there'll be any pressure against bringing this kind of data forward in the future or not. But I don't know. I don't know whether it's a good idea or not. Right now it's looking good and it's encouraging, so I'm happy about it. But I imagine that can be fudged too, and the 2028 playbook is already developing for Republicans, flooding the zone with shady and questionable early voter polling.
Oh my. Yeah. Well, speaking of shady and questionable, what do we think, if any, is going to be the impact of a new story overnight about Trump having groped another woman, and a story that has Jeffrey Epstein in it? I mean, obviously it's not going to fundamentally change the race, but could you see if 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 people being, I forgot about that, but boy, I really don't like that guy. Okay, I'll vote for Harris.
I mean, it's so hard to say. On the one hand, sure, anything like that. I mean, there are millions of people that through it all have somehow ignored, forgotten, mentally blocked out, whatever, his being an incredible sex pest and having a decades-long record of being abusive and assaulting women. And I guess for some people, they'll be reminded of it. Oh, yes, right. That wasn't topmost in my mind, but now it is. And on the other hand, it's also very easy to imagine people saying, yeah, I know that about him already. That actually isn't news, and I don't care. But I don't know. It certainly can't help. I wouldn't think it's not going to encourage anybody to vote for him. They'll find somebody in a diner somewhere that's now I'm more defiant than ever. But I imagine that wouldn't be my closing argument plan, but I wouldn't turn away from it either. And a prominent person, a famous model, which is, again, par for the course, something that he did all the time anyway. But yeah, I know that there was a story recently pitched, and no one wanted to hear it because it was coming from Mark Halperin, but the killer story that he's heard, and he's, I guess, holding off on reporting. I think I've actually heard this rumor discussed before that Trump had, again, made unwanted advances on somebody, but it turned out to be the daughter of a very big donor, and that this was somehow going to make a difference. But I haven't seen the story really break wide yet, and I don't know if it really will. It's hard to tell whether anything penetrates the head of people who are considering voting for Trump for any reason.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to convince you or convince anybody listening that this is a bigger deal than it is. She's got a note in his handwriting. I'm right? It's a postcard. It's from some hotel in Florida. It says, "Stacy, you're home away from home. Love, Donald," and in his very distinctive handwriting.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I guess that doesn't, by itself, if you were putting him on trial once and for all, finally, for one of these assaults, and it's the first one to make it there, yeah, as evidence goes, it tends to prove that they met and that he thinks they have some kind of a relationship, but that could mean anything. And I guess the question would then be, it has been 10 years since this story in general broke wide. Where have you been? But then that's also how often do you want to speak publicly about having been molested by Donald Trump? That's got to be rather difficult to stomach thinking about it all. But I don't know whether this makes a big impact or not, but I am reminded every once in a while of how many people there are in the world, and some percentage of them will claim, honestly, in their opinion anyway, in their mind, they really have never heard this exactly about Donald Trump, or there have been rumors, but yeah, they may point to something like this and say, well, there's the proof, postcard. By itself, to me, as a juror, I would say, well, I'm not certain what that proves exactly, but this is a court of public opinion, not a court of law, and it could mean anything to any number of people. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't bet very heavily on it, though.
I was a little surprised it wasn't in in today's New York Times, and I don't see it unless I don't see it on the Times website even. The Washington Post has an article, CNN.com has an article, The Guardian is covering it. So I'm a little surprised that the Times doesn't have something yet. I do think it's a front page story, even if it's not above the fold, big letters front page. This is a big deal. And I think the media should be the way it deserves to be covered. Most of I'm surprised the New York Times doesn't have an article yet. That to me is a little, frustrating. As somebody who, like you, obviously wants the media to cover things the right way. How many articles, we could talk about media bias, but how many times has Tim Wall's been forced to answer, including in a debate about having said he was in Hong Kong, at the wrong time of a given year when Trump lied about going to Gaza. Right? Trump said, I went to Gaza. He never went to Gaza at all.
I don't think anybody, no, I didn't even see that one. I don't think that has registered with me.
I mean, it's been covered, but he was never asked about it. And he hasn't sat for a debate since that came out, but just, because obviously, they're held to different standards.
Certainly
we know
true.
Right? One sexual harassment, a sexual assault accusation, used to sink a candidate. Now it's just like, wait, check off number 27 and what's 28 now? Sorry. Very frustrating.
Yes. I mean, it's difficult to come to this conclusion, and it's very painful and frustrating to entertain the idea that, people are just going to say, that's just not news. That's why it's not on the front page. We've heard this about him before, but it should be news. Well, yeah, but you've heard this about him 35 times before. And I mean, that should be news, right? We're going to grill Tim Walz about, right, when was he in Hong Kong? Or you said IVF, but you really meant, the different treatment. And whatever. I mean, again, the same story over and over again. Well, where's the emails treatment for his this, that, and the other thing? There's 500 things. He says he's conducting private foreign policy with Netanyahu. He's still in touch with Putin. He stole nuclear secrets and kept them in his basement while he was talking to Putin. You name it. But, yeah, I guess I can imagine in the editorial minds at some of the major papers. Tell me though, why? Like, how many more papers do I sell with the 37th allegation of sexual assault? I guess you have me there, but still, it is an election in a week and a half, and say traditionally that would make the papers, but I don't know. And it may be that tomorrow is the day for the New York Times. But it makes a difference, by the way, Saturday publication versus Friday news dump inclusion. The circulation's just lower. People are going to be playing the word games tomorrow, not reading the front page. They won't read the front page until Sunday. So, I don't know exactly what to point to. But then, of course, there are other reasons in circulation too, witnessing the LA Times controversy and the editorial page editor having to resign over interference from the ownership group.
I mean, that's ludicrous. And on the double standard, Van Jones had a great line, I think it was yesterday, that Trump gets to be lawless, but Harris has to be flawless.
Oh, that is good.
Yes.
That's pretty good. And that really encapsulates it. Plus, it rhymes. He can really deliver that line, I bet. I'm just hearing it in his voice. So,
Muhammad Ali kind of,
Yeah. But it's exactly the case. It actually encourages Trump supporters in many cases. They really get a big kick out of there's your riling up the base. They love to see him doing things, without regard to the law, that he's above it. One headline that had sunk in is the Supreme Court says it's okay. Well, he's not president now, so even according to the Supreme Court, it probably wouldn't be okay. But I don't know. They're watching him act with impunity. They're watching Elon Musk act with impunity. Warned by the Department of Justice, apparently, about his $1 million giveaways. He paused for a day or two and is now back to it, I understand, and moving to other states with it as well. So
that's just so absurd. That the idea that that's legal is insane to me.
Yes. I don't know whether I'd like to know what his calculus is, either whether he thinks, well, it might be illegal, but this is the sort of thing you get fined for. But obviously money means nothing to me. That could be it. Or I just enjoy daring Democrats to do something about it that just proves to this Republican base the impotence of Democrats in general. And if you're not convinced to vote for Trump yet, but you're still pondering voting for Trump, look at this show of strength versus the show of impotence by Democrats and make your decision based on that.
I don't know. I will tell you, though, breaking news.
Yes.
The post polling average that I talked about did their overnight update, and it's all holding. They've got Harris leading Nevada by less than 1. They've got Trump leading North Carolina by less than 1. They have Harris leading in the big 3, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan by 2 in each of those 3 states, and they've got Trump leading in Georgia and Arizona by 2. So with Pennsylvania, even without the one, even with only looking at the ones where you've got a 2-point lead or more, Harris has enough to go all the way because she's got the big 3. She's got Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and they've been showing the blue dot in Nebraska because that one's kind of in the bag. So that's why I think I talk about the weighted coin flip. These quality polls, and they've got her leading by 2 on average in each of those 3 states.
Right.
That makes me feel okay.
Yeah, that's good. And 2 points. I know it feels tight, but it does represent a very significant number of votes. Hopefully, that means that we're not talking about counting, recounting, and recounting again, and coming up with number 3-4 digit number of raw votes to win by, so that there's room for more challenge and more accusations of cheating. 2 points is a fairly significant win in states of that size. Several, tens of thousands of votes. So, all right. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Unless the door is open if there's another point we would like to make before sneaking away. But thank you for joining us today. Oh, it's difficult. You know what? The music is now interfering, unfortunately, with the call. Well, thanks again. All right. Well, guess what? We are back, as it turns out. Yeah, I guess turning the music all the way down to try to fix the interference there has created a new problem. All right. Well, we are back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And because the music was creating some interference via Skype, we couldn't hear Ian on his way out the door, and I felt like that was not the way I wanted to end things. So, still with us here, just at least to wrap it up, or in case there's any more breaking news. Ian, final thoughts on your way out?
Have hope. Keep up the fight. And vote, and then get 10 other people to vote too.
Right.
Like I said, I am cautiously optimistic.
That's good news. It's good to hear. And is there historical reason, as a professor of historical studies, historical reason to have that kind of optimism? I hope so. Every
election is unique, but Professor Alan Lichtman, if you keep up with that, has predicted the outcome every time since who knows when, and he's predicting Kamala based on these various fundamentals, which are, to be honest, a little bit subjective, but based on various fundamentals that she will win. So
okay.
More hope.
A good record, certainly. Better than the octopus, perhaps. So it's always good to come out ahead of an octopus as a distinguished professor himself, I'm sure. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ian, for joining us. Good luck with the conclusion of the book, and hopefully the candidates make it easy to come to a smooth conclusion. Feel like you've wrapped up nicely and aren't going to miss out on anything outrageous that should be in the book. But I guess that's for the second edition and the reprinting, which we all hope for.
Right. Well, I'm sure that once Election Day happens, Trump will stop talking and never say anything controversial again.
Yes, he'll just go to golfing. And it's one thing about Trump is he can drop all the spotlight and attention seeking and turn on a dime. So I think he's used to it by now. Yeah, I guess we'll be living with him for, well, as long as he's living, very likely, unless he loses the power of speech any point along the way. And his dad lived for quite a while. So I guess we can't rule that out. All right. Well, I didn't mean to put a damper on your optimism. We'll stick with winning the election and having him be an annoying gadfly. It would be a fine trade.
Absolutely. But it would be nice if he did the whole Ariel in the Little Mermaid and lost his voice.
Yeah, it would be terrific. Certainly, I mean, he could just go back to enjoying his golf and just leave it at that. I don't know why he really feels like he needs to have that kind of influence, but he's a weird guy, and he's always been like that. Oh, one thing perhaps we can talk about at some point in the future, as you were mentioning, you were wondering whether or not they felt internally in the Trump campaign whether they needed to bring forward a flood of shady polls just to keep his spirits up. And I realized one of the things I would like to get back to at some point myself, but maybe it's something you know about. I wonder whether this rings bells for you, that someone had brought up the influence in his life of the book, the old-timey almost, and I guess we think of it as a self-help book, but I guess it's something more insidious than that, The Power of Positive Thinking, which I guess, like I said, for me has always been, I've never read it or heard much about it other than saying that's the first sort of self-help title I had ever heard of, and I just regarded it as this dopey, old-timey, if you think positive thoughts, things will be happy and you'll do better in life. But it actually turns out to be a much more insidious program. Are you familiar with it at all?
I know that I did know that Trump was influenced by it. I think it's Norman Vincent Peale. I just sort of took the title like you did at face value. I don't know much more about it than that, though.
Okay. Well, I'm learning more about it, and maybe that's something I'll share with the audience at some point. If I learn more about it, that might make for a great topic of discussion with you. I would assign you the reading, but you're very busy right now.
Well, I take your assignments very seriously, Professor.
Okay. Well, come on. I'm serious. This is my job. I always think back to Donald Sutherland in Animal House about that one when I think about the plight of professors these days in particular, having one more kid still in college and realizing how in one ear and out the other it sometimes it feels like you might be teaching the wrong age cohort sometimes. People value the education and the ability to have texts analyzed by world-leading experts right before their very eyes, very differently in their, let's say, 50s and 60s than they do in their 20s. But you do a tough job there, Ian. Thanks for hanging in there and educating the next generation.
Well, you're very welcome. And I will say that any appearance where we cover both Animal House and The Little Mermaid well.
That has to be a success. Okay. Well, thanks very much. Do take care. We'll check in with you, I'm sure, post-election. And as the book gets closer to publication date, that will be a cause once again to check in. But yeah, hopefully we have just good news and we can analyze the optimism sometime post-election very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me on. It's always a lot of fun for me.
Yes, me too. Take care and see you soon. All right, Ian Reifowitz, everybody. I'm going to move on at this point to the balance of the show. There are a couple of things that I wanted to be able to bring to your attention. And now I'm trying to think of the best segue of these things. I guess maybe covering some of the run-up to the election. I should perhaps discuss a couple of these stories. Gosh, there's just so much. And really, I should be going on to the power of positive thinking there, but I think that'll have to be a special presentation at some point. But I have a couple of pieces to the puzzle before me here. Both the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and I'll see whether or not that entirety of that text is available to me, and I see that it is not. And so perhaps I'll resort instead to the coverage of the same story via New York Magazine. Georgia audit is the headline here. Georgia audit exposes Trump's non-citizen voting hoax. This is Ed Kilgore, and I suppose I should double check to see I have access to all of that as well. I do. And so he'll explain what I can't get to at this moment, and with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Atlanta Journal-Constitution increasingly becoming rising up the list in terms of non-hometown papers that I might eventually have to subscribe to round out our coverage here. Their headline on this same story, 8.2 million people can vote in Georgia. The state says it found a total of 20 non-U.S. citizens who registered, which, of course, the MAGA troops will take and wave as a bloody shirt. Look at that. I can't believe it. Double digits of non-U.S. citizens. That's only the one that were found by the rhino Brad Raffensperger, who is hopelessly biased against Trump. It must clearly mean that there are millions. 8.2 million people can vote in Georgia. 8.1 million of them are all non-U.S. citizens, illegally registered. But yeah, this is the upshot of a pre-election audit by the Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Raffensperger canceled those 20 registrations, by the way, and referred the cases to law enforcement, in case you were wondering what eventually becomes of this. But yeah, the lead paragraphs of this article by Mark Niesse, perhaps Niesse for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, lets us know the basics. An audit uncovered a whopping 20 non-citizens out of 8.2 million registered voters in Georgia, according to findings announced by Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger on Wednesday. 9 of those 20 non-citizens actually have cast ballots in the past, while the other 11 were registered but never actually voted, the audit showed. Election officials canceled their voter registrations and reported them to district attorneys for possible prosecution. Although they'll make for some interesting cases, I think, too. But that's also a good point. Out of 8 million voters, only 20 were improperly registered. And of that 20, more than half of them, more than likely, knew that if they were registered, they may have had no idea that they were even registered. Sometimes this stuff happens at the motor vehicles office, right? You go and you can get a license as a non-U.S. citizen. If you are going to drive around in this country, you ought to have a license. So they do the responsible thing, go pass the tests, make sure you're familiar with U.S. traffic laws, demonstrate that you can drive adequately, get yourself a license so that you can conduct daily business, go to work, shop, bring your family around, do all the normal things that everybody is expected to be able to do as an adult in this country if you want to be car-based. So they're doing the right thing. But now, of course, it's kind of an automatic thing. They forward your name and address to voter registration. I guess you can opt out of it. I don't even know. But I guess that's probably how most of those things happened. And maybe they didn't, maybe they answered a question incorrectly about, do you want us to forward your information? I don't know. I guess so. Is that what you would like to do? Are you just trying to get along here? I just want to get the license here. What do I have to do? Well, we'll send your information. If you're not eligible, they won't register. Mistake gets made. 20 people out of 8 million get registered. Half of those 20, more than half of those 20, just say, I know that I'm not a citizen. I know there's an election. I'm not going to the polls to even see whether I was mistakenly registered. It's not within my bundle of rights. I'm just not going to do it. So that's sort of an interesting thing, too. Even people who mistakenly get registered such that they could go and cast a ballot, generally speaking, do not go and do that. That's how rare this form of voter fraud really is. Right? Oh, they're bringing in millions and millions of people and they're going to register them as Democrats and tell them to vote. Well, half of them aren't going to do it anyway. And by the way, half of people who are born here in the United States and have every right to cast those ballots don't do it anyhow because, pick your reason. But yeah, as for people who know that they probably don't have the right to that registration, most of them aren't going to vote anyway. And of those who did, I'd be interested to see what kind of case can get made there and what sort of credence is given to the plea of, I don't know why you told me I was eligible to vote, but I figured the responsible thing to do as someone living and working in this country is to participate in the civic society. So I went and voted. It wasn't an insidious plan to steal away something I'm not entitled to. You told me I was entitled to it. You registered me. I don't know what your stupid law is about. I just went to get my license, and then you told me I was registered to vote, and you started mailing me all these things because I was registered. Both parties are mailing me exhortations to go vote. I thought that was, the right thing to do. So I went and did it. I see how that kind of plea works out for you in court. Anyway, the upshot of the whole thing is explained in Ed Kilgore's piece for the New York magazine. Georgia audit exposes Trump's non-citizen voting hoax. Makes all these same points here. Of all the fables Donald Trump is told to justify his past, present, and future claims of stolen, quote-unquote, stolen elections, one of the most persistent has also been one of the least well-founded, which is an amazing dynamic all by itself. The idea that non-citizens are voting for Democrats in large numbers. Half of them aren't even voting at all, meanwhile. After his 2016 win, I would have put that in scare quotes, Trump claimed he would have won the national popular vote, which he actually lost by more than 2.8 million votes, had not illegal voters flooded the polls to support Hillary Clinton. Did he offer any evidence for this allegation? Zilch, nada, nothing, which isn't unusual for Trump. It's not news. We didn't put it in the New York Times, for instance. The two major national studies of voting fraud allegations, one from the Conservative Heritage Foundation, I don't know if you've heard about those guys, Project 2025, etc., and the other from the nonpartisan but progressive Brennan Center, found, both of them, no evidence of non-citizen voting in numbers significant enough to affect any elections. A frequently distorted 2014 analysis of non-citizen voting based on extrapolation of Arizona online survey data. Not a great place to start. Suggested an upper range for non-citizen voting in the hundreds of thousands nationally. Even that's a big number, all by itself. But A, it's not true, and B, it's nothing compared to 180 million people casting ballots, or whatever the number. I guess we're closer to the 160 million number rather than 180, but still, even so. Even if it really was in the hundreds of thousands nationally. But the lower range of their estimate, by the way, much, much smaller, Kilgore notes, but it included no verifiable examples. No verifiable examples. That is weird. And the author has frequently complained about Trump's misuse of his data. Well, oh no, I can't believe he misused anything at all. Even though Trump and congressional Republicans have cynically demanded new laws cracking down on alleged non-citizen voting, it's already a crime under federal law, punishable by both a prison term and deportation, which are both pretty serious. And ordinarily, by the way, if the crime was a gun crime, they would say, enforce the laws already on the books. That doesn't mean anything for them in this context. This year, Trump has not just repeated unsupported claims of massive non-citizen voting, but placed them near the heart of his campaign message. In a barely disguised version of the racist right-wing great replacement theory, Trump has repeatedly alleged that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have, quote, opened the border precisely in order to recruit illegal voters for their candidacies. I mean, completely unnecessary, winning entirely based on actual citizen voting. But what the hell? Why not go ahead and do this, which is a thing that we have never been able to actually demonstrate even once happening in ways that make a difference, and when they're demonstrated to be happening at all, people get referred for criminal prosecution, as in Georgia. Well, any evidence of this inflammatory claim? No, of course not. It's supposed to be self-evident. Of course it's happening. I heard a guy speaking Spanish just the other day, right? If it were actually happening, of course, there would be concrete evidence in every direction, but in fact, even in red states, there's more and more evidence that it's all a Trump hoax to motivate his base, rile up the base, in fact, as Ian would note, and perhaps justify another denial of the results. One clear case is in Ohio, as the BBC recently noted. We have to turn to the British to highlight this properly. And it says here, earlier this year, the office of Ohio's Republican Secretary of State Frank LaRose, a Trump supporter, examined around 8 million registrations, a little bit like the one we heard before, 8.2 million in Georgia, right? Well, he examined 8 million registrations and found 600, that's a lot more actually, 600 people on the state's voter rolls who could not prove their U.S. citizenship. It doesn't mean that they actually are non-citizens, but they couldn't prove that they weren't non-citizens. That's, I guess, it's something to be interested in, concerned about perhaps. But again, 600 out of 8 million. In Georgia, far fewer, 20 out of 8.2 million. So what do? Meanwhile, the state also struck an additional 155,000 registrations off the rolls, largely because of address changes. That's, oh my God. Well, that doesn't really mean anything in terms of citizenship, but you changed your address. We don't do that here in the United States of America. Okay, I'm not really sure what the basis was for that one, but okay, we can imagine one. Back to Kilgore. Finding a handful of people who, quote, could not prove their U.S. citizenship is not the same as proving that they were non-citizens, and it's entirely possible that some of these voters who lost their registration had been planning to vote for Trump. I guess that's possible. But beyond that, there's a new example of official red state voting data that contradicts everything Trump is saying on the subject, as the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports. This part we did get to read. It's the first couple paragraphs that we were able to look at, saying that 20 non-citizens cast, 9 of the 20 non-citizens cast ballots several years ago. 11 never went ahead and even tried that. This part we didn't get to see. This is the most comprehensive citizenship check ever conducted in the history of Georgia, if not the most comprehensive check ever conducted in the United States, said Raffensperger. Sounds very Trumpian in that. Georgia is a model when it comes to preventing non-citizen voting. I don't know if I would go that far, but it's certainly something he believes. More to the point, Kilgore continues, Georgia is a model when it comes to documenting the absence of non-citizen voting. That's not necessarily what Raffensperger expected when he initiated his audit. I think it actually might have been. Earlier this year, he penned a Wall Street Journal op-ed warning that, quote, progressives wanted non-citizens to vote, though the examples he cited all involved local, not federal elections where, once again, non-citizen voting is already illegal. Although in some cases, non-citizen voting is legal in local elections, as I understand it. But, I mean, if it's legal, then, hey, what's your problem with it? You could fight that law, but nothing illegal is happening. Anyway, what's clear now is that the Republican election supervisor of one of the 7 battleground states has definitively certified the voter rolls to be free of non-citizens. If Harris carries Georgia, what will Trump blame it on? Well, he already hates Brad Raffensperger, so he'll blame it on his not doing it correctly, I imagine. Yes, people deep in the tank for the 45th president will observe that despite his Republican identity, Raffensperger is fatally unfriendly to Trump, as evidenced by his refusal in 2020 to, quote, find enough additional votes to erase the Biden victory in Georgia that the secretary and his Republican boss, Governor Brian Kemp, duly certified, an act of independence that led Trump to try to purge them in the 2022 primaries unsuccessfully. But it increasingly is clear that facts are what's most unfriendly to MAGA's claim of massive, quote-unquote, illegal voting. So, very true. Good to point out. Part of a larger narrative, part of a larger story, of course, including, as I have tucked away here in pocket, why, despite changes to the Electoral College counting process and the processing in Congress, why still the big fear of Trump simply declaring victory and trying to reverse the results? Well, here's one argument by a familiar voice, Rick Hazen. We hear about quoted in articles all the time. He's written one of his own here for Slate. Why the blue shift that everyone seems to have forgotten might be more dangerous this time. In other words, why Trump will continue to make the stolen election claim and why he might be able to rile up his base even worse this time. Everyone, he begins, seems to expect that Donald Trump will prematurely declare victory on election night, whether or not news organizations project him the winner. NBC's Hallie Jackson even asked Kamala Harris about it during a Tuesday interview. Harris responded, "We will deal with the election night and the days after as they come, and we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that." And that's good news. There's really not much more answer you can give to what will you do if if MAGA world explodes based on nothing. I don't know. We're just going to have to wait. I mean, I do know what we think we can do. We have to kind of wait and see what form their screaming and protest takes. And I guess to the extent it makes any sense to respond to it, we would respond directly to it. But yeah, legally speaking, we're responsible adults. We're preparing for it. And there's no reason for us to tip our hand at this point. Plus, also, we just don't know exactly how crazy they will be. But despite Harris's assurances, Hasan continues, and despite this country's experience with Trump in 2020, when he declared at 2 a.m., a 2 a.m. press conference right after the election, quote, "We did win this election," before anyone had any idea whether Trump or Joe Biden had won, there are good reasons to believe that many of us are not prepared for what's coming in the days after November 5th. We could well once again face a situation where Trump is ahead in the tally of announced results in key states such as Pennsylvania, only to see Harris declared the winner by the weekend after the election. The days after the election, as this potential blue shift materializes, could be fraught with disinformation, confusion, and even potential violence. It's on the media and all of us not to let things spin out of control. It is possible that Donald Trump simply wins the election on election night in an electoral college route. I guess it is possible. If the razor-thin polls in 7 battleground states are off by just a point or two in his direction, it could well be an early victory for Trump. Okay, the Democrats have to acknowledge that, I guess, because they love to do that. I'm fact-based. I'm just pointing out that this could happen. But anything short of that is also possible, from a 2000-style Bush v. Gore type nail-biter to a pattern more like 2020's, when it took days to count ballots and determine that Joe Biden had decisively won the Electoral College battle, all the way up to, of course, a possible Harris blowout, which we're all hoping for. None of these possibilities, I had to add that. Rick Hasen wouldn't be so irresponsible as saying that. My goodness, even though I imagine he is hoping for it. None of these possibilities would be met with a gracious Trump concession or a call for patience. Now, it is clear that Trump will declare that he won or say that there was cheating. During our pandemic-laden 2020 elections, the public sphere was full of warnings about the blue shift, sometimes called the red mirage, depending on where you're coming from. But many more people were voting by mail in 2020 because it was safer given COVID-19. Back then, Trump was falsely suggesting that mail ballots were laden with fraud, leading far fewer Republicans than Democrats to vote by mail. The results from in-person balloting are reported faster than the votes by mail because those mail ballots have to be checked for signatures and other measures taken to ensure that they are acceptable. Right? It was the very process by which we verify that they are real and honest votes and ought to be counted. In other words, being careful, paying fealty to the Republican worries and fears and objections, and accounting for them and demonstrating the validity of these votes slows them down. But then they just point at that and say, that's fraud too. There's nothing that isn't fraud if it doesn't lead to their victory. Anyway, back then, Trump was falsely suggesting that mail ballots were laden with fraud, so Republicans voted in person instead, and the results in person are tabulated faster because of all the checks that go into checking the validity of mail-in ballots. This meant that earlier reported ballot totals favored Republicans, you know the dynamics, and later totals favored Democrats. Add to that, big Democratic cities taking longer to report their in-person results on election night than did redder rural areas, with city results sometimes coming in the middle of the night in what Trump and his allies derisively called, quote, ballot dumps. At one point on election night, the totals reported in Pennsylvania, for example, showed Trump leading Biden by 700,000 votes, only to see Biden declared the winner days later by about 80,000 votes. Well, deja vu may be on tap for a week from Tuesday. Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, alone among the swing states, have not updated their laws to allow for the pre-canvassing or processing of mail ballots before Election Day. And they won't start checking those ballots and preparing them for counting until Election Day itself. Not a great situation. It certainly lends itself to this kind of lie. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. One last segment for the week, and we'll use it to race through the rest of this Rick Hazen article if we can. And let's see. All right, I'm being distracted by the stupid pop-up ads. Even Slate is plagued with these things, but at least it's not moving the text around. They're just dumb ads. I don't know what's happened. I don't know what's happened to online advertising. It used to be so smart and focused. Oh, well. So where were we? Oh, yes. We were remembering that Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, alone among the swing states, have not updated their laws to allow for pre-canvassing of mail ballots before Election Day. I thought we had heard that Pennsylvania had made some change, but I wondered if maybe it was counting early votes. I think Pennsylvania used to also wait to tally early votes that were cast in person until Election Day, and maybe they have changed their mind about that one, or do I just misremember? Do you recall it being the case that we heard something about a change in Pennsylvania, but I guess it's not a change with respect to the mail-in ballots, and I can't believe that they didn't work that out in the intervening 4 years, but some people love the controversy, I guess. So where were we with this? If Republican legislatures in both states have blocked bipartisan proposals to update their laws to be more like Florida's, where election officials can report most of their vote totals by the end of the night on election night, I suspect that some Republicans in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin have resisted making the change because uncertainty and the blue shift is a feature, not a bug. It allows for calling into question the legitimacy and fairness of the vote count if Democrats win. So, what can we do about all this? That's a good question. First, compared with 2020, there has been surprisingly little coverage of the upcoming blue shift. This is true even though Democrats, again, are much more likely than Republicans to vote by mail. Republicans have transitioned this time to more in-person early voting, and those results will be reported quickly. The word needs to get out for people to have patience. Oh well. Indeed, a new academic study reveals that pre-bunking, explaining why election results take time, can encourage public trust and confidence in election results. I guess it doesn't necessarily follow, but it can help. And this is a little bit like what Ian was discussing that ought to have been done with economic issues as well. Yes, recovery from the pandemic will likely require economic policies that might spur inflation. This is known We understand that nobody's going to like this, but consider that the alternative is that we stay on the downward trajectory, the incredible, gigantic drop-off in employment, the huge spike in unemployment claims, the lack of items on the shelves, the shutdown of the economy, the total collapse of the stock market, etc. But in order to get those things back on track, it will require, yes, some inflation. And some of this was going to happen anyway, given the supply chain collapse as well. But, more pre-bunking should be necessary. Well, more pre-bunking is necessary here and yet has not been done. But, I don't blame the candidates. That's true. They need to focus on their messaging. But, whose responsibility is it to do more of this pre-bunking? I'm not sure where I would leave that one, but it's now probably too late. Second, the media and others need to be careful with explaining the vote totals and the expected blue shift as the process unfolds. In order for us to have a fair and safe election in 2024, according to a report from an ideologically diverse group of experts convened by the Safeguarding Democracy Project at the UCLA School of Law, the messaging should not be that one candidate or the other is, quote, in the lead. Instead, the key framing is that the race is, quote, too early to call. And that's a familiar refrain across news organizations, television news, broadcasts in particular. But on the other hand, the MAGA rioters have their own television stations now, and they don't watch broadcast television, and instead will be forwarding one another clips from wackadoodle right-wing online news things that are dressed up in ill-fitting suits to make it look like they're news, saying, no, the opposite, Trump is in the lead, and if that ever changes, it must obviously be evidence of fraud. Now, along with the message that we should be portraying that it's too early to call, there need to be clear and transparent explanations from election officials about the expected timing of it all. When should we expect results from Detroit and Philadelphia and Atlanta? The more we know, the more we know now, the more prepared everyone else will be. Even with this improved messaging, expect a better organized and better financed effort this time to sow doubts about the election results on election night itself. The Washington Post reports that over 230 Republican candidates have cast doubt on the integrity of the upcoming elections. We will again see grainy videos, perhaps aided by AI, purportedly showing fraud or ballot dumps or election workers messing with the count. We saw this in 2020, for example, with the two Georgia election workers, Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman. They, by the way, successfully sued Rudy Giuliani for $150 million for falsely accusing them of election fraud. They have started proceedings to take control of his Manhattan penthouse and Yankee memorabilia to pay the judgment that he owns. But those defamation suits won't necessarily work in real time to deter bad actors. But yes, that too, a very exciting development, and in the news roundup, still waiting in pocket. But yeah, they've gotten to the point now where they're actually going to be starting the ball rolling on liquidating Giuliani's assets, much, I'm sure, to the chagrin of his children, who will have to pay for his long-term care, but he brought it on himself. But liquidating his assets to pay off part of this judgment to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. The disinformation should be worse now. In 2020, Twitter had a robust trust and safety team policing election lies. This time around, Elon Musk has turned X into a cesspool of electoral disinformation, which he regularly shares with his 200 million followers as part of a much larger effort to elect Trump. Meta, meanwhile, stung by Republican political attacks on its trust and safety measures in 2020, has tried to retreat from politics on Facebook and its other products. There's a ton that tech companies can do, but likely won't. Demoting political content won't stop these platforms from being used to generate disinformation, spread it, organize, etc., as happened with the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Nor can we discount the potential for violence that could crop up in the period before news organizations have enough data on outstanding ballots to call the election one way or the other. Nor should we think, for whatever reason, that they're calling the election one way or another would stop the violence. It may, in fact, just increase the violence. But okay. U.S. government officials have said that Russia and Iran may themselves seek to foment violence, setting Americans against one another. Why invade when we can just be spurred to kill one another instead? People are exhausted by politics. I don't blame them. But many will be in for a rude awakening when they wake up on November 6th. The election may be too close to call. Donald Trump may again have declared victory, and the uncertainty of not knowing who the next president is for the next few days may spawn much greater problems. Okay, just wanted to add a little dose of pessimism to the optimism that Ian Reifowitz left us with. Let's head back into pocket and see what we can sneak in order to wrap things up. I did mention when Ian was on that there was news about Musk's election manipulation, including his $1 million giveaways to people who were signing his petitions. Apparently, after news of the Department of Justice weighing in with a warning that this may very well all be illegal, Elon Musk's super PAC didn't announce any daily, quote-unquote daily, they put that in scare quotes, daily lottery winner on Wednesday. Marshall Cohen and Shania Shelton, is it Shania or Shania? Shania, I guess, like Twain. I think the spelling is the same. I don't know. Marshall Cohen, Shania Shelton, CNN reported this pause that happened. Elon Musk's super PAC didn't announce a winner for its quote-unquote daily $1 million giveaway to registered swing state voters on Wednesday, the same day that news broke that the Justice Department had warned Musk's group that its sweepstakes might be illegal. The pro-Trump group, America PAC, had publicly named a winner every day since Saturday when Musk announced that he would award $1 million every day to people who signed his petition. The petition is in support of the First and Second Amendments to the Constitution. Yes, that's the one. You know, the one we all kind of support, even if we are dismayed at how the Second Amendment is being interpreted, and increasingly the First Amendment as well. But anyway, importantly, it is only open to registered voters in the battleground states who signed a petition and therefore are eligible for the money. CNN reported Wednesday afternoon that the Justice Department had sent a warning letter to the super PAC notifying it that the lottery might violate federal law against offering incentives such as cash or prizes to induce voter registration. People briefed on the matter told CNN. The super PAC has announced its winners each day to fanfare with flashy videos posted to social media and celebratory tweets from Musk. It's unclear if the Justice Department letter is why the super PAC didn't publicly name a winner on Wednesday, but probably, I guess. CNN has reached out to the super PAC seeking comment. The ex-owner and Tesla CEO has defended the giveaway multiple times on social media in response to a post claiming Musk was paying to register Republicans. Musk said on X that winners can be from any or no political party, and you don't even have to vote. He did not address the potential legal problem of only opening the lottery to registered voters. That's where the issue lies, I guess. After Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, a Democrat and former state attorney general, said Sunday that the giveaway was deeply concerning and deserved legal scrutiny, Musk posted on his X platform that it was, quote, concerning that he would say such a thing. On Sunday, the second day of the sweepstakes, the super PAC reframed its messaging around the giveaway, describing the money as a payment for a job. In social media posts, the group said winners would be selected to earn $1 million as a spokesperson for America PAC, and subsequently posted pro-Trump testimonial videos featuring the winners. However, several election law experts who spoke to CNN pointed out that the fine print on Musk's super PAC website explaining the official terms of entry did not change. Musk, the richest man in the world, has thrown his support behind Trump and has given more than $75 million to his pro-Trump super PAC. He has said he hopes the sweepstakes will boost registration among Trump voters. He made his first appearance with Trump on the campaign trail earlier this month when he called on people to register to vote and cast Democrats as a threat to democracy at Trump's rally returning to Butler, Pennsylvania, the site of the assassination attempt in July. Musk has also held his own town halls last week in Pennsylvania, etc., etc. So, you know, whatever. We've gotten to the end of this article, but it needs to be read alongside this post on Blue Sky from Joshua Friedman, using his Halloween name Beetlejosh, by the way. But Joshua Friedman, Joshua J. Friedman, if you're trying to look for him on Blue Sky, says with these screen grabs from Twitter, Elon Musk's pro-Trump super PAC has resumed awarding $1 million to registered voters, this time in Michigan and Wisconsin, despite having been warned by DOJ that this is likely a violation of the law. So, thumbing his nose at it, or following bad legal advice, or following no legal advice whatsoever, or hoping for a pardon, I'm not certain what he's counting on. But for the most part, I don't think these things will land you in jail anyway, normally, although this is a pretty massive and flagrant violation, and maybe should. But if it's a fine situation, he's giving away $1 million a day as it is, so I don't think that the fines are likely to bother him a great deal. There's more reporting on exactly what it is that makes these things illegal, and we probably ought to dive into that at some point as well. I also will, I guess why not throw this piece of information. I don't know if it's been written up in the papers yet, but probably by this point. But yesterday all I had was this press release from the Senate Finance Committee in a joint call by Ron Wyden and Jamie Raskin for calling for the Justice Department to appoint a special counsel to investigate Jared Kushner for acting as an unregistered foreign agent, and that does seem to trip Trump people up fairly frequently. Kushner has acted as a shadow diplomat and political advisor to Mr. Bonesaw, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudish Arabia, who directed billions in Saudi funds to Kushner-owned affinity partners. So how about a quick run through their press release laying out their case here? Senate Finance Committee Chair Ron Wyden and House Committee on Oversight and Accountability Ranking Member Jamie Raskin called today on Attorney General Merrick Garland, perhaps you know him, to appoint a special counsel to investigate possible violations of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, or FARA, by Jared Kushner, son-in-law and former senior White House advisor, in fact, to ex-President Donald Trump, as part of investigations launched last Congress by House and Senate Democrats. Senate investigators have uncovered that since the end of the Trump administration through mid-2024, Kushner's firm, Affinity Partners, has received as much as $157 million in fees from foreign clients, including $87 million from the Saudi government, while generating no return on investment, paying zero earnings to investors, and investing only a small fraction of the funds that it has received from the sovereign wealth funds of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. What a combination. Public reports indicate that Kushner remained politically active throughout that time period, particularly on matters of U.S. foreign policy related to the Middle East. While on the Saudi government's payroll, Mr. Kushner is simultaneously serving as political consultant to former President Trump and acting as a shadow diplomat and political advisor to MBS and other foreign principals. Despite being engaged and enraging us, but engaged in plainly political activities, Kushner has not made FARA disclosures to DOJ related to the millions of dollars he receives annually by entities owned and controlled by the governments of Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar. Wyden and Raskin wrote, the scale of these undisclosed foreign payments to Kushner, coupled with the national security implications of his apparent ongoing efforts to sell political influence to the highest foreign bidder, are unprecedented and demand action from DOJ. And they really, really do. And, it's something of a pattern with Jared Kushner. Oh, I failed to fill out the paperwork properly. Oh, that was a mistake. Give me an extension and I'll clear it up. He did this over and over again with his own financial disclosures while serving in the White House. Now that he's out of government, I doubt very much that he's worrying very much about filling out FARA paperwork. FARA is, of course, designed to ensure that the American public and lawmakers are made aware of foreign efforts to influence U.S. public opinion and political activities, and requires individuals acting as an agent of a foreign principal to register with the DOJ. In their letter, Wyden and Raskin cite multiple examples of political activity Kushner engaged in while being paid by the Saudi government and other Gulf states without registering under FARA, in possible violation of federal law, and they are bullet pointed here, advising the Saudi crown prince on U.S. foreign policy, advising former President Trump and his presidential campaign, selling geopolitical advisory and political advocacy services to foreign government clients through his private equity fund, arranging meetings on foreign policy with the Qatari prime minister on U.S. soil, engaging in political fundraising in support of Trump's campaign, and influencing members of Congress on domestic and foreign policy. Well, the full text of their letter to the DOJ is also available at the link at the bottom of this press release. Just wanted to sort of update you on the fact that people are watching, and Jared Trump hasn't cleaned up, why not? Jared Kushner hasn't cleaned up his act any, and if for some reason his lower profile convinced you that that's what he had been doing, no, not actually the case. All right, let's see. What else have I got here? Why not share this scary bit? Oh, I can see why I'm not sharing it, is because is it paywalled? This from Politico. I've not run into this being necessary. This must be the magazine. And I don't know if I really want to give them any of the information that would be required to get a hold of this text. But it had an interesting title to it. Politico magazine writing on, can I even reload this so I can see the title thing? The very real scenario, they claim, where Trump loses and takes power anyway. The subheader, if Trump overturns the 2024 election, here's how it could happen. But why should you get that information without submitting your email and your employer and your job title, et cetera, and subjecting yourself to spam emails from Politico? All right, I thought that might be of some interest, but quite honestly, I think we could already imagine how he would do it and why, regardless. Okay, so let's see. It leaves us with a little under 10 minutes in order to get through one or another of the stories. I think I would really like to continue with that Daily Grail piece that we were reading the other day about Curtis Yarvin and his weird connections and how he's the in-house political philosopher to the San Francisco-centric, billionaire-centric weirdo network that was behind the nomination of J.D. Vance. But I also feel like we would need a refresher on that before diving in, so maybe we do that all at once at some future date. There's just a number of other things that I really wanted to kind of get into, and maybe this one needs to be on the record here. There was a Washington Post piece, too long probably for us to get all the way through, that really stood out in terms of just reinforcing the conspiratorial thinking that's going on all over America and the knock-on effects of it politically, etc. Focused on the hurricane recovery in western North Carolina, but that really brought to mind, actually, it made me think mostly about the way the judge who was sentencing Tina Peters, the county clerk in Colorado, who hatched the whole conspiracy to break into voting machines and steal away the hard drives and equipment to, give them a quote-unquote forensic analysis that would prove all the fraud that was going on for Biden and reinstate Donald Trump as president, and how he sentenced her like, you're not Sherlock Holmes. You're not a hero saving the republic. You are a charlatan. You've abused your power. You've abused your position. You're lying to people, and you should go to jail for it. And how many areas of life that now applies to? So many people running around convinced that they are heroes saving the republic, but they are idiots who've fallen for their own nonsense and fallen down a rabbit hole of confusion and conspiracy that should land them in prison, and hopefully one day will. How a conspiracy-fueled group got a foothold in this hurricane-battered town is the title of the Washington Post piece. Over the course of 11 days, a supermarket parking lot became a snapshot of the chaos that can unfold in some corners of post-disaster America. This by Brianna Sachs, Scott Dance, Will Aramis, Samuel Oakford, and Jeremy B. Merrill. An October 23rd piece, now going on a couple of days old here, but really needed to be shared. And also, this too jives with our ongoing theme of just sort of these guys not only setting themselves up as heroes, but as sole control in some of these hurricane-stricken and isolated areas, using the opportunity to set themselves up as, Mogadishu-style warlords if they can get to it, but kind of using their militia link and militia presence to establish what they hoped was physical control over recovery efforts. It's really something. Lake Lure, North Carolina, is the dateline here. It started with hot coffee, as so many things do. Hurricane Helene had just cut off this already isolated foothill town from everything: power, water, information. Paralyzed, the only thing that residents Karen Harris, C-A-R-I-N, Karen, or maybe Corinne, I don't know, Harris, and Hillary Yoxall, Y-O-X-A-L-L. The only things that they could think to do was post up outside their Ingles supermarket and hand out something warm. Soon, donations began to pour in, and a makeshift supplies distribution center emerged from the parking lot off the main two-lane road. Then, everything got more complicated. All they were trying to do was help out, right? A group called Veterans on Patrol showed up. And veterans, everyone trusts veterans, right? Showed up in Rutherford County late on the night of October 11th. Just 4 people with no supplies. But their leader, Lewis Arthur, came with a lot of promises and a big vision, which he said was sent from God. And why not? A 3-year plan to help this lakeside community and others around here bounce back, according to Yoxall and Arthur. And at first, it did seem like a godsend. Yoxall, Harris, and other residents said they started organizing the piles of diapers, boxes of canned food, and mounds of winter clothes. But as soon as Yoxall, a retired Army nurse, and Arthur got to talking, he started telling her about his work fighting cartels at the border, about his need for armed security. And she started to get a bad feeling. There's something wrong here, she told another longtime resident and fellow organizer. What she and others didn't know yet was that Veterans on Patrol is an anti-government group steeped in conspiracy theories, and that it has a well-documented history of embedding itself in communities to launch missions related to migrants or purported child trafficking or whatever else is hot that day in the news, I guess, according to Southern Poverty Law Center and the Western State Center, 2 watchdog groups, and that the group was motivated to come to this small town because its members believed that the government was using the hurricane to move people here off, yes, the lithium-rich land and stop them from getting it back, according to the group's posts on Telegram, a messaging service. Thanks for telling us what that is. Hurricane Helene was an act of war perpetrated by the United States military, of which we're veterans, which means you're supposed to be able to trust us, or something weird like that. A land grab responsible for, quote, murdering hundreds, if not thousands of Americans. How can you even do this? This is what the group was saying on October 3rd. That same day, it launched its disaster deployment operation, stating that it was, quote, coming to the aid of those who will not sell, have stolen, or be restricted in, I guess, their property, and to replace the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Really? Over the course of 11 days, this makeshift hurricane supplies depot in a supermarket parking lot became a snapshot of the chaos that can unfold in some corners of post-disaster America. Residents came together to help their community because local officials were unable to. People came searching for critical supplies because the federal government does not give those out as part of its disaster response. An extremist group, motivated by anti-government beliefs and conspiracy theories, was able to show up, wield influence, and become a source of help for some and fear for others. And in the mix of all that, an armed man from one town over, also fueled by viral anti-government misinformation, joined the fray. Let's see what's going on here. He showed up right when veterans on patrol did, Yaxel and 2 other volunteers said, joining their Sunday prayer circle. Then he started talking about, quote, hunting FEMA, she said. Police eventually arrested and charged him with going armed to the terror of the public. What is happening in my backyard? Yaxel said last week. I don't know these people. And if they're trying to get a foothold here in my community, they're getting a good start. Helene, the hurricane, was historic for many reasons. It was a hurricane in the mountains. It spurred massive floods and landslides, destroying thousands of homes and killing more than 200 people. Researchers also said it led to an unprecedented amount of misinformation directed at FEMA and its workers, often amplified by figures such as former President Donald Trump. I can't believe he's involved in all of this. In addition to veterans on patrol, members of more than a dozen other extremist white nationalist and militia organizations also came to some hard-hit western North Carolina towns for disaster response, allegedly, according to the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, which studies extremism and disinformation, and the Southern Poverty Law Center. Guess what? They were taking advantage of the chaos to try to get a foothold there and essentially, literally take control of the town. It's amazing to watch the poor folks there who were just trying to help out their neighbors figure out what they were falling victim to.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, as much as I'd like to stick around and talk about this, it's time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Let's see what's on tap here. Trump has issued a threat to Jack Smith, just like it came from Vlad. Wow, what do you know? No embellishment, no changing, no softening the language. Stay tuned. Find out more. We'll see you next week.